Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art and culture, and this is Billboard Breakdown. Well, that didn't last too long. Almost as quickly as it took that #1 spot, Kendrick Lamar and Taylor Swift were elbowed off the top, and it's not exactly surprising that that happened either. Once again, the fight over the #1 spot will likely be the biggest story everywhere else this week, but it obscures a lot of what happened below, where a whole load of songs surged up the charts, and we got another well-sized crop of new songs. And a nice change of pace from last week, some of them are actually decent. But before we get to all that, we need to start with our top 10, where Wiz Khalifa and Charlie Puth took the #1 slot yet again with See You Again. We pretty much owned airplay, and a surprise twist took back the top spot on YouTube as well. It did slip a little bit on streaming, and the sales are no longer what they were, but airplay gains have not slowed down, so ultimately where I'll end up is anybody's guess. Where things get a little bit more interesting are with Bad Blood by Taylor Swift and Kendrick Lamar. And what looks like happened here is what happens when the hype starts to peter out. It might have been the perfect storm of factors to get her to the #1 spot, but keeping her there, different question. Longevity these days, it needs to have more of an airplay component. And while she gained something there this week and had a firm grip on her sales, it wasn't quite enough, as she did slip on YouTube and she doesn't have the same streaming presence. Where you will see streaming dominance is with Trap Queen by Fetty Wap, which took the top spot for streaming on demand this week, had solid sales, and despite very slow airplay gains, is still picking them up. Beneath that, Shut Up and Dance by Walk the Moon went #4, which would be ruling the radio if it wasn't for See You Again, and another solid week of sales. Streaming did kind of slip though, and the lack of YouTube does hurt that song, so it'll be interesting to see what happens when the airplay starts to slow down a little bit. The next surprise for me this week came in at #5, where Uptown Funk by Mark Ronson and Bruno Mars went up a spot, and not just because of other chart weaknesses, although that did help, because it did gain a bit of airplay and had a better than expected sales week. And with consistent strength on YouTube still, it was enough to stay above Earned It by The Weeknd, which took a hit to #6 as airplay struggled, streaming took a major hit, and sales are barely worth mentioning. I can see it dropping out fairly soon, maybe against Want to Want Me by Jason Derulo, which had another solid week in sales and airplay, only to compensate for streaming slipping back a little bit as it held on to #7. Hey Mama by David Guetta, Nicki Minaj, and Afrojack held on to #8 in a similar way, only a few steps back because Derulo has more established airplay right now. But with gains across the board, I can see it as real competition. And then we had Sugar by Maroon 5 at #9. And look, I get the feeling it's sticking around on airplay and YouTube inertia, that's about it, because the sales are sure as hell not there. And finally, sticking around like nobody's business, Nasty Freestyle by T-Wayne, because once again, it's here because of streaming and sales, pretty much the only reason it's here. Personally, I'm amazed we're allowing a low-rent T.I. wannabe last as long as he has, but with all the gains we had this week, I don't know, something's bound to come up. But before we get to that, let's talk about our losers and dropouts. Not gonna lie, I'm a little bit amused that Feeling Myself by Nicki Minaj and Beyonce dropped off, because they might have been able to get some swell and managed to get some radio beyond the recurring list if they had actually paid attention to how long their song had been on the charts and are hovering around the bottom before dropping the video, because barring a massive boost, it's not coming back, sorry. Beyond that, the only other major dropouts are Take Me to Church by Hozier, ending a very respectable chart run, and Ayo by Chris Brown and Tyga, where there's nothing to respect whatsoever. Interestingly, there weren't that many losers this week. The three of them fall into the exact same category of songs, having shorter runs and less impact than they would otherwise expect. All Day by Kanye West, Theophilus London, Alan Kingdom, and Paul McCartney dropping hard to 79. I Want You to Know by Zedd and Selena Gomez falling to 85. And unfortunately, Raise 'Em Up by Keith Urban and Eric Church sliding into 98. All of them are probably not going to last a full 20 weeks at this rate on the charts, and in some cases that's a disappointment. Then we have the hit To Kick the Dust Up by Luke Bryan falling to 41. My hope because the song is garbage, but more likely because there's no video yet, and country radio is always a little bit slow to pick up new songs. And finally, we've got Nasty by Bandgang Marco featuring Dro sliding back to 54, which is a little bit fascinating because for all their anger at T-Wayne for ripping them off, he still did more with the song than they could with their brand of aggressively annoying new crunk, and the public seems to be responding to that. As someone who doesn't like either song, the most I can hope for is that maybe only one sticks around. I can only really tolerate one of them. Two, it's too many. And you know, the sad fact is that doesn't seem to be the case. This takes us to our gains this week, and the one major gain I missed last week, Flex Ooh 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 by Rich Homie Quan, now having risen to 31. And really, it has to be on the strength of the beat with some texture, because everything else is a pathetically limp, smeared over mess that's too lazy to even bother having a melody. It's not like it's the only terrible track gaining traction, as Crash and Burn by Thomas Rhett rose up to 76, which makes me lament the loss of regional country radio and its increased consolidation and gentrification under DJs like Bobby Bones. Pretty much the only excuse for why this is here. But really, beyond that, the rest of our gains, actually pretty decent. The Night Is Still Young by Nicki Minaj getting another boost to 38, likely on its way to being a top 20 for this summer, and Oh My's Cheerleader follows a similar suit with a bump to 16. And particularly, it was a really busy week for country radio, with Baby Be My Love Song by Easton Corbin rebounding to 65, Tonight Looks Good on You by Jason Aldean jumping up to 74, Crushing It by Brad Paisley bouncing up to 83, and most surprisingly, Diamond Rings and Old Bar Stools by Tim McGraw and Catherine Dunn surging up to 68. The biggest and most welcome surprise for me, though, was the success of Uma Thurman by Fall Out Boy rising to 56. Maybe it just took a little bit of time for people to recognize it's a damn great summer song, but I hope it manages to pick up some real momentum, because it's been 5 months since we got the song, and I'm still not sick of it, which is saying something. I hope this hits the top 20. But on that note, let's deflate some of my good mood by talking about our one returning entry.
I woke up feeling like I was on the moon. I woke up feeling like I need 100 gold. Look at the flick of that wrist. 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 Look at the flick of that wrist.
The more I listen to the song, the more I'm confused of why anybody would care about it. Derivative pretty much across the board from the beat, the rapping cadence, and every bit of the content, with the only distinctive thing about it being that synth that bleeds across the end of the pre-chorus and contributes nothing. The best thing I can say about it is that it's, well, kind of forgettable. I won't care about it a year from now, so unless I have to cover it again, it will never cross my mind. Well, that was quick. Now on to our new entries and hopefully some better tracks. Starting with number 95, Planes by Jeremih featuring J. Cole.
On a blimp. Tell her be free, baby, spread your wings. Get your legs in the sky like a plane, let me guide that. I'm the pilot. Can't nobody see you 30,000 feet on your knees in them products, make the freaky shit come up out her.
So I have to ask, is Jeremih ever actually gonna release an album, or make a music video, or be seen in public? I know, he's apologized a number of times why we've seen so little of him, but maybe it's the reason that Def Jam is so hesitant to release an album because Jeremih's just not helping drive any momentum in the promotion for this upcoming record, which apparently is supposed to be released mid-July, but who the hell knows? Either way, it's really hard for me to care. I've said in the past that Jeremih's the sort of artist that slips through the cracks. If it wasn't for J. Cole's presence on this song, I reckon that this would have a similar fate. Maybe rise a little, but nobody would care about it outside of a couple critics and fans in 6 months. Now, to be fair, in comparison with trash like Don't Tell 'Em, Planes is at least tolerable as your standard R&B sex jam. And I kinda like the faded synth and low-end bass that's driving the melody. But it's a track that's so minimalist that Jeremih's jittery flow sounds so oddly out of place for me. There's no flow to it. It doesn't help that most of the lyrics are kinda ridiculous. Dude, No Whip is so big that you can't find your girl unless you're a bus driver. And then there's J. Cole's verse. I'll give him this. You can tell he's just goofing off, and he does make it sound kind of fun. He's got that charisma. Nothing he said was all that good. I did find it funny that the normal steal your girl line was written to imply that she was with both guys and not just J. Cole, but it was played with much lighter tone. I like that, which doesn't match the instrumentation whatsoever. But look, at the end of the day, the track is passable enough for me, and by Jeremih standards, that is saying something. Number 94, Kiss You in the Morning by Michael Ray.
Kiss you running red lights, baby, set the mood right. Just like everything you're doing to me right now is making me crazy. I wanna kiss you on the dance floor, kiss you like a let's go. Come on, baby, let me hear you say oh oh. I wanna kiss you with the neon lights in your eyes glowing.
You know, now that The Voice is over, I was hoping we might actually get a break from reality show stars showing up on the charts, but nope. Michael Ray, for those of you who don't know, and I'm assuming that's the majority of you, apparently won the show The Next Fame is at Your Doorstep, a competition that debuted a couple years back on the CW, and this led him to snagging a record contract with Atlantic. Now that was back in 2012, and it's taken him this long to launch a song, and really this is all he could come up with? Yeah, Michael Ray, he's got some vocal personality, and there's nothing that egregious about the country sound on this song with some decent guitar work, but that's really all I can say about the song that stands out to me. The lyrics are forgettable bro country mush with clumsy rhyming about all the times and places where Michael Ray wants to kiss you, and for somebody who's not looking for that, the song does very little for me, especially considering that any dozen other bro country songs that I've heard does the exact same thing. In other words, just kind of forgettable. Skip it. Number 93, You Changed Me by Jamie Foxx featuring Chris Brown.
Ain't no other girls in mine, it's me and you, baby, I love you. Used to be the kind of nigga never wanna settle down. Cause you changed me, baby. Cause you changed me, baby. Cause you changed me, baby. Cause you changed me, baby.
You know, Jamie Foxx is one of those guys I always find it a little bit difficult to evaluate, mostly because he's on the extremely short list of Academy Award winners who have also landed some real charting hits. It's always frustrated me that Jamie Foxx's brand of R&B, though, never called back more to the soulful power of Ray Charles, a role that won him that Oscar. But I'd argue more of it is because of the era of R&B where he notched his major hits back in the mid to late 2000s. To me, Blame It with T-Pain is a sort of track that belongs less to Jamie Foxx, more of just a cultural artifact of what R&B was like at the time. Spoilers, it wasn't that good. So it's not like he brings a ton of unique personality to that song. On some level, I think that's the issue I have with You Changed Me. They have to pile on so many effects of most of Foxx's voice to make it distinctive during the chorus, which to some extent, he doesn't need those effects because his second verse does show him bringing a little bit more natural soul, and it actually sounds pretty good. And you know what, the lyrics aren't half bad either. They play themselves a little bit classier than Chris Brown normally touches, and while he still makes his verse all about sex, because of course he does, he doesn't sound that bad on it. The lyrics aren't bad. I do wish there was more of a melody anchoring the track though. The instrumentation's pretty bare bones, but I honestly didn't mind this song. And like what I said with Jeremih, when it comes to Chris Brown tracks, me not minding it, that's saying something. Number 92, Buy Me a Boat by Chris Janson.
You can buy me a truck to pull it. You can buy me a Yeti 110 ice down with some silver bullets. Yeah, and I know what they say, money can't buy everything. Well, maybe so, but it can buy me a boat.
Okay, I'm gonna be honest with you. I have never understood the whole fascination around boats. I'm allergic to seafood, I don't fish, I have no interest in sailing or yachts, and the upkeep cost seems stupid expensive. And on that note, Chris Janson and I might agree on that bit. A name you will only recognize if you read the liner notes of recent bro country records that aren't directly affiliated with Luke Bryan. He did eventually have some success off of briefly signing with Columbia Nashville, and he had a hit way back in 2010, but after that dried up, he went independent and dropped this song, his most best to date. And honestly, when it comes to modern country, this isn't bad. The sizzling guitar licks that brood over the song, Chris Janson's coiled, rough-edged twang, and only slipping when some of the thinner, weightier tones creep in. And yeah, while I don't get the whole boating thing, there's a certain pragmatism to the track's blunt admission that it's kinda nice to be filthy rich. And it's a nice change of pace from singing from the perspective of not having it and wanting it, then bragging about having it and everyone else not having it. At the end of the day, yeah, sure, it's kinda just shallow greed and wanting a friggin' boat, but again, the song's passable. I'll take it. Number 91, Young and Crazy by Frankie Ballard.
About my glory days when I'm pushing 80. How am I ever gonna get to be old and wise if I ain't ever young and crazy?
You know, I reviewed Frankie Ballard's Sunshine and Whiskey way back last year, and since I reviewed it, I haven't gone back to it. It's one of those albums that mostly went in one ear and out the other. Not precisely bad, but nothing all that memorable. But in comparison with most of the album, Young and Crazy was one of the songs that I mostly liked. The guitar melody was pretty solid, had some good snarl and punch, especially on a pretty slick solo, and I actually dug the lyrics, mostly using the fact that he's trying to wreck up the experience now when he's young by going off crazy before he's settling down. Going back to the track now, you'd have to wonder that crossing a line a few hundred times might feel a little bit excessive, but that's nitpicking. I think my biggest issue with the song might ultimately come back to Frankie Ballard himself, mostly because he doesn't bring a lot of real, unique charisma to the table. He's a fine enough singer, but his tone's very relaxed, which doesn't really suit the sort of young exuberance you need for a song like this. Just seems to come across a little bit too easy, if that makes any sense. Still a good song, but not quite great. At least for me. Number 90, Lovin' You Easy by Zac Brown Band.
You make loving you all I wanna do. Every little smile, every single touch reminds me just how much it all makes loving you easy.
Oh boy, I was worried about this. See, the Zac Brown Band's last record, Jekyll and Hyde, was not really a country album by all definitions, across a half dozen different genres of varying degrees of success. And this song, prime example of that, mostly because it's a song drenched in mid to late 70s disco, especially with the shimmering background textures, the organ, the bass line, that guitar, like in the very polished production. Hell, the most country element of the track is that fiddle segments, then they just feel kind of weird to me. That said, if we're judging the song by the standards of that genre, is it any good? Well, yeah, I definitely like it. It's got a good flow to it, a very good vibe. I like the backing vocals. There are plenty of better songs off of Jekyll and Hyde I would have picked instead, but this is passable, and the key change and the crescendos are pretty damn fun. But let's be fair here, this does not belong anywhere near country radio, and I suspect if it's not sent to pop soon, it's going nowhere. Number 89, Stitches by Shawn Mendes.
But I know that I'll make it out alive if I quit calling you my lover and move on. You watch me bleed until I can't breathe, shaking, falling onto my knees. And now that I'm without your kisses, I'll be needing stitches.
So even after reviewing his debut album, I'm still a little bit torn on Shawn Mendes. He's one of those young pop stars, a Canadian pop star that I want to like. And Something Big was an awesome track in taking Ed Sheeran's typical template and infusing it with some rollicking heaviness. I did like his passion there. But it's the sort of song that's damn near impossible to follow up without feeling like a bit of a letdown. And despite being a good song, Stitches does kind of fall into that category. It's a bit of an odd track too. It makes you question how much Shawn Mendes really wants to fall in love with this girl, especially as him tripping over himself makes this relationship seem like absolute hell. And given that she's watching the entire thing play out and not helping, I can kind of see his point of view if he's kind of averse to it. And in any case, Shawn Mendes doesn't exactly bring the same intensity to the song, which is a problem. And while the groove is good, the chorus just lands on a bit of a sour note for me. I'm not sure what it is. Once again, far from a bad song, it's pretty good, and I dig the nuance to it, but for me, just kind of misses the mark from really clicking. So I'll take it. Number 80, Electric Body by A$AP Rocky featuring Schoolboy Q.
Pop your way up the first class. She clap, 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 clap. She drop it low, then she clap, 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 clap down to the floor. Shake that ass, girl, make that Gucci wet. Shake that ass, girl, make that Gucci wet.
Okay, I honestly didn't expect any songs from at long last A$AP to be sent to radio. And to be fair, A$AP Rocky didn't really make a song like Fucking Problems on that album that had the ingredients to be a major smash hit. The fact that he landed 2 songs on the chart at all amazes me. But let's start with the faster and more energetic track, and how it's far worse. It's here for a chorus about women shaking for their asses as A$AP Rocky stacks paper and drives expensive cars, like we haven't heard that before. It's at least delivered with a good flow, the one point I'll really give this song, but the wordplay is nothing that special, and the creaking, ominous feel of the guitars doesn't lend it any sort of momentum or power for me, although I did kind of dig what sounds like a tambourine over the chorus. Nice touch. But then we get to Schoolboy Q's verse, and dude, I'm trying to like you here, and you got bars, gonna whip that bitch like Ike so I can fuck your bitch off hype. Even if I kind of like the more hard-hitting beat on the hazy outro, it's really a case of obnoxiousness and weak content hampering a beat that's only so-so. In other words, not very good. I'd skip it. Number 62, LSD by A$AP Rocky. Now, this is the sort of A$AP Rocky track I can get behind. And believe it or not, that's actually been kind of controversial among critics. Well, it's because he spends the majority of the song singing in a drugged out haze that basically focuses on getting high as balls on acid and screwing this girl. But maybe it's my taste for good psychedelic rock or that thicker synth line and beat that comes midway through the song before the chorus reprise. But honestly, this really clicks for me. There's a melody that really carries through the song that I like. The lonely guitar fragments played pretty well across the entire song, and there's a density to the mix thanks to the thickness of that bass that really comes across strikingly well. Sure, A$AP Rocky's not a good singer, but it kind of works when he sounds as drugged out as he is. I'm not saying the song is much more than drug-addled hedonism, because it's not, but I'd argue there's a way to do that well, and I'd say that A$AP Rocky pulls it off there, at least for me. And finally, number 20, The Hills by The Weeknd.
But the only time I'd ever call you mine, I only love it when you touch me. Now feel me when I'm fucked up. That's a real me when I'm fucked up. That's a real me, babe.
So remember what what I said about wondering where Jeremih's new album is? Same thing goes for about as much with The Weeknd, who's had a lot more success off of collaborations with Ariana Grande and off of 50 Shades of Grey than any of his own material. But in this case, this is apparently the lead-off single for his newest album, Chapter 3, which is apparently set to come out this summer. And wow, this song was not what I was expecting. The odd thing is that I can kind of see what The Weeknd was trying to do with the song. Take the chilly Hills Have Eyes sample, the warped guitars, that shrill scream, and fuse it with that bleak, borderline horror movie tones that you often see in modern trap-flavored hip-hop and rap. It kind of fits. And I'll give The Weeknd credit for at least sketching lyrics with the sort of creepy, unstable air of the sort of psychopath who would have lyrics like, "When I'm fucked up, that's the real me." But man, I'm sorry, I don't buy this at all, and it has everything to do with The Weeknd's voice and writing. To be blunt, he's not Nick Cave, he's not Michael Jackson. Probably one of the few artists who could push this sort of sinister vibe in mainstream R&B and make it work, and it usually worked with a much tighter composition that this song just doesn't have. But the larger issue is that The Weeknd isn't visceral or all that shocking as a singer, at least not much as he thinks he is. His voice doesn't have that sort of raw punch to it, no matter how many layers that makes it sound grittier that they slather on top of it. It's at least better than when Maroon 5 made a similar song with Animals on atmosphere alone, but to me, I don't know, this misses the mark. And why the hell didn't he release this around Halloween? Much better time and place than the beginning of the summer. So yeah, overall, a better week than last week, but not great all around. For the worst, Flick of the Wrist by Chedda to Connect narrowly takes it from A$AP Rocky and Schoolboy Q for the Electric Body. But for best, well, LSD by A$AP Rocky gets that, but honorable mention's trickier. You know, I'm gonna give it to the Zac Brown Band's Lovin' You Easy for being easiest for me to enjoy the song, but again, does not belong on country radio. Will that be corrected next week? Will the song stick to the charts? Well, that assumes it'll last at all, but you know, only time will tell. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Billboard Breakdown on Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.